So hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webcast. Today, we are going to talk about using Microsoft's Power Platform to amplify your business solutions. So my name is Amanda Teschko. I am a Principal BI and Analytics Consultant with Thorogood, and I'm joining you guys today from my home in Philadelphia. I imagine many of you guys are probably joining from your homes as well. And I'll be joined on the meeting today with my colleague, Kirby. Charlie is also joining us from Philadelphia and is a consultant with Thorogood. I've listed our email addresses and our LinkedIn's there, so if you guys do have any questions after the event or want to get in touch just to talk about anything more, feel free to reach out to us. I thought I would start today with just a little bit of an overview of who Thorogood is for anybody who is not familiar with our company. So we are global BI and analytics specialists. We have offices in London, New York, Philadelphia, Singapore, Sao Paulo, and Bangalore. And we work with our customers to help implement different strategies, solutions, and services that really allow them to make better business decisions based off of the data that they collect. We have a strong focus on the combination of really analytics, technology, and ensuring that that's always done in the light of a business focus. We work with a range of different blue chip customers, and we tend to have a strong industry focus in the consumer goods, pharmaceutical, banking, and insurance sectors. I've listed some of our customers there just to give you a sense of some of the experiences that we have and where we're drawing some of our thoughts from today. We are an independent consultancy in that we partner and work with a number of different technology vendors. I've listed a sampling of some of those technologies here. Obviously, today we'll be talking about Microsoft and their Power Platform, but if you do have any questions about how that platform might integrate with other technologies in your enterprise rollouts, feel free to speak to us about any of these technologies or to reach out if you've got questions across any of these platforms I've listed here. So with that, I thought we would talk a little bit about the objectives for today's session. We're going to keep it pretty simple today, starting out by just introducing some of the components of the Power Platform, so giving you just a basic understanding of what's in it and why it's kind of become so popular. Then I'll give a couple examples of how the different components can work together in a way to deliver value and really to fill in some gaps that certain components might have. Then I'll turn it over to Charlie, and what he's going to walk you through is an adaptation of a use case that we've worked on with some customers that will look at combining a couple of the different components of the Power Platform in a way that really demonstrates some of their interoperability. I'll start off today by just introducing what is the Power Platform. So the Power Platform is Microsoft's offering that has a number of low to no-code tools that can be used individually or together to really deliver a lot of business value within your organization. The one that you guys are probably most familiar with and is probably most popular at the moment is Power BI. Power BI is a business analytics tool, so you use it for things like bringing together data sources and doing reporting on top of it. Power Apps is a part of the platform, and that is really the tool that's used for application development. So if you think about using applications on your cell phone or mobile device or applications that you might access even on a laptop, this is a platform for developing those. Power Automate is really geared around process automation, so a little bit of what's happening behind the scenes to make a series of events occur. And then the newest offering is Power Virtual Agents, and this has just been brought into the stack recently, and that really allows you to create intelligent virtual agents or chatbots. So if you think about interacting on a website with a bot talking about different products or asking if you need help. So we'll go into a little bit more information on what each of these do individually before talking a little bit about some of the interactions between them. So the first one I've got here is Power BI, and I think this one is probably the one that's got the most popularity at the moment. We've run a number of kind of dashboard and end-of-day events with Microsoft and customers learning Power BI, so I know there are thousands and thousands of you out there who have done those sessions with us or with other partners. The Power BI platform is really intended to be able to unlock business value by being able to put more visual views on top of the data that you collect. It allows users to connect to a variety of different data sources. So that's Microsoft data sources such as Excel files or SQL Server databases, but also sources from a number of other vendors as well. So I think one of the things we've really seen with Microsoft really since Satya Nadella kind of took over is this opening up of Microsoft's platform and being able to interoperate with a number of different sources and technologies. And that's pretty evident within Power BI, but all of these offerings really is you can connect to databases from other vendors, you can connect to cloud streaming services such as Salesforce. So it gives you the ability to connect all of the data sources into an application. You've got the ability to transform and cleanse the data there, and then effectively create these visual interactive reports and dashboards. Now, Power BI has two key components. There's the desktop component, and that is, an application that you download onto your desktop, and it's predominantly used for developing the Power BI dashboard. So for creating your data models, building the visualizations. And then there's also the service component. That is a web-based, kind of cloud-based component of the offering that's really used to be able to publish your reports so that they can be accessed by members of your organization, where you can kind of collaborate and share some of the things that you've created. So what is Power Apps then? Well, Power Apps is a low-code application development environment. So if you think about what it used to take to kind of develop the applications that we were downloading on our mobile devices, for example, you needed to have a pretty heavy coding background to be able to, create the different screens, work out how they interact with each other, what the buttons do. Power Apps is Microsoft's offering to try to bring to more people the ability to create these types of application experiences. You've got the ability to do what they call canvas or model-driven applications. Canvas applications are more kind of free-form. You design the application and then fit the data into it. Model-driven ones are where you have a strong data model in place already, and you want to use the model to kind of drive what's in the application. You have the ability in Power Apps either to kind of start from scratch, so a totally clean slate, or to use some of the pre-built templates that Microsoft put in place, which for somebody who's getting started with it for the first time can be a good way to kind of learn the tool. You can do quite a bit with just some of the templates that are there. The thing that I think is pretty interesting about Power Apps is that because it is a low-code environment, you can have users start to learn how to build these applications, but you can also do some pretty complex things there. So you can have developers as well create more custom or complex applications using this platform and just be able to develop them a lot faster, which is nice when you want to be able to respond to things quickly, which we're seeing quite a bit, obviously, in today's world where there's quite a bit of uncertainty. And you do have the ability here as well to connect to enterprise data sources in your organization. So if you want to surface information in these apps, such as the products that exist in your organization or different groupings that are used commonly, that's all possible so that you're using these applications in a way that's in line with some of the current kind of data catalog and classifications that you use in your company. And I'd say we'll show some examples of this, but I think two of the kind of core components to Power Apps are looking at data in lists for users and also being able to create user forms where users can enter information into the application to be submitted that can then be used elsewhere. I'll talk a little bit about the interaction of this in Power BI. People are looking for a way to kind of capture information for things that tend to be more manual. So if it's, say, commentary or managing mappings, as the example we'll take a look at later, these Power Apps allow an opportunity to be able to create something that is a little bit more robust in the organization that allows for data user entry. Power Automate is the third one we'll talk about, and that is really focused on process automation. So what I mean by that is you can almost think of this as a bit of a workflow. So it's a series of steps that the application will run through that is based on different triggers and actions. So you could use a trigger such as a change to a file somewhere on your OneDrive, the action coming out of it being to send an email or refresh a Power BI application. Power Automate really is kind of the scheduling and processing that sort of happens behind the scenes that allows the different components to work together and to be able to kind of create some different dependencies within your process flows. And you can use these triggers and activities to kind of create a sequence of events that occur, and things can be triggered by events that happen, buttons that somebody presses, set schedules, so running a certain time of day, or different business processes. And then the last and newest one is Power Virtual Agents. This is a way to create powerful chatbots. It is a no-code graphical interface, so that means you kind of drag and drop things around. And it really uses out-of-the-box artificial intelligence and natural language processing models that have already been kind of created. So it doesn't require a data scientist or creating these complex analytic models. It uses things that are a bit out of the box to try to best predict the answers to these questions. And it allows you to deploy these virtual agents to things like websites or Facebook, Teams, Slack, all sorts of different models where you might engage with customers or with your employees. So now that we've got a bit of a sense of them individually, I'll just talk about a couple key points where we see the interaction to be quite important. So a common thing that we see between Power BI and Power Automate is that in Power BI, if you are refreshing data, it has to be done on a schedule. So you have to say, every Tuesday at 2 o'clock, for example. What Power Automate allows you to do is to use different things that occur within your organization to trigger refreshes of your Power BI application. So, for example, you could think about a file that's in OneDrive that exists where the data exists in Power BI. You can use a trigger in Power Automate that will effectively say when that file changes, tell Power BI to refresh. Or you might have like a workflow process where numbers get signed off by a manager, and then as soon as the manager signs it off using the workflows that exist in kind of through an email, then it causes the Power BI application to refresh. So Power Automate and Power BI kind of fills a little bit of a gap there that gives you more flexibility in how and when that model refreshes, and a little bit more dependency upon other processes that exist in your organization. There's also the ability to use data in Power BI to trigger an action elsewhere. It's a bit limited at the moment. It's mostly limited to if you create a KPI in Power BI and that KPI gets exceeded, you can use that as a trigger, and you can do things like send emails or kick off other activities. And I imagine we'll start to see a bit more kind of robust integration with those sorts of things in the coming months and years. Another common combination is using Power BI and Power Apps, and we'll look at this a little bit in our example. So one of the biggest asks I think we've seen customers have when using Power BI is that users always want to be able to input data into the model that exists in Power BI, and in a pretty kind of easy, just enter it in an interface type of way. So whether that's selecting a grouping or doing some what-if analysis, putting in forecast numbers, that's not something that Power BI handles very naturally. So in order to get that data into Power BI, just using Power BI, you would have to have them, say, change it in an Excel file that then gets loaded in. So there are kind of multiple steps and a little bit of a disconnect for users. Something that we've seen be pretty powerful is using the power of Power Apps, which is really good at giving users the ability to enter information or enter mappings and feeding that directly back into Power BI. And we'll show an example of that in the demonstration today. But you can think about the value of using these two things next to each other with something like your field sales reps who might be out at a customer site wanting to show, past sales values real visually in the Power BI application, and then wanting to enter new sales information through the Power App. You can embed the two together so that you can see them on the same screen, and that starts to create just a much more robust kind of experience for how these applications get used. So I will talk about kind of combinations of two of them. We're going to set up a little bit of a use case for you where we look at three. We're going to look at the combination of Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Automate. And in this use case, you can assume that we are a consumer goods manufacturer. And like many consumer goods manufacturers, we have a number of different SKUs and products that exist within the company. And we have some common roll-ups. So you might always want to look at them grouped in categories or subcategories to see how things are performing. But as we know in today's environment, business needs may always arise that cause you to want to look at that data in a different way, to group it differently. And sometimes you want to do that very quickly so that you can very quickly respond to the business need. You might use that grouping for just a period of time, or you might use that grouping forever. So in the example we're going to look at today, we're going to think about a scenario where there might be some public backlash to a material that you use in some of your products or an ingredient to some of your products. And you might want to get a sense of how exposed are you? So of your product portfolio and the sales in it, how many of those products might be exposed to this public backlash and might impact sales? So you might go through an exercise where you do an initial run through and assign all of the SKUs to either affected or unaffected, but you might find that as you start to look at this data over time, new SKUs are coming in, or you might get external data where you're getting SKUs from some of your competitors and you need to be able to assign those. So we're going to use a combination today of Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Automate to look at ways that users can see the amount of sales dollars that are unmapped, and then manage just on the fly how they can assign values to those SKUs so that they can get a better understanding of what the current situation of the company is. So the solution that we're going to take a look at today and that Charlie's about to take you through is going to use Power BI to visualize the sales and to see the impact of the unmapped products. So we're going to group our products into affected and unaffected by this public backlash, and then we're going to see that there's quite a bit that's unmapped. So that unmapped means we don't really have a good understanding of the extent to which we are exposed. Then we're going to use the Power Apps to allow users to enter for a particular SKU, whether that SKU and product is affected or unaffected, or to enter comments if they don't know, just so we've got a better dialogue around how we're kind of separating those things. And then Power Automate is going to be used in the background to make sure that those two things are working together seamlessly, and to make sure that as the user updates the mapping in Power Apps, Power BI gets refreshed so that it can be reflected in the visualizations that we're seeing.
So let's take a look at what we might do to kind of take a look at how this Power Platform might be integrated in this use case to solve the problem. So we're a consumer goods company that has a lot of new incoming SKUs, new products coming in, and a lot of ways of looking at sales. So here we have a standard dashboard that might be just kind of a basic view of sales by category, sales by month, our standard views that are really coming in all the time for us. But we also have our custom grouping, as alluded to earlier, which has a little bit more specified to our use case. But just as a baseline, this is Power BI in the service, in the web app. So you can also be developing in the Power BI application. But we're going to use this because it's a good way to integrate and have a lot of people able to access all the same file in a single source of truth as long as they have access. So we have a standard report here in Power BI. Let's dive into the use case and see how integration is done. So this standard view is great for analysis of the metrics that we want to be looking at all the time. But how can we view this in a way that's aligned to this custom grouping that we've had to deal with now? So at any point in time, new business questions can arise that can call for these new aggregations. So in this scenario, we have a public backlash to certain ingredients, whether they'll be affected or unaffected. To get visibility into this issue, we need to be able to align a new grouping to indicate whether or not they will be affected, and a complete picture of the implications for our bottom line. So we'll need a direct view of the products as they're shown here. But new products are always coming in, as we're a consumer goods company, so they're not always going to have this grouping. Ignoring them will also ignore material impacts, as we see the blanks here, so things that have not yet been mapped total almost 700,000 in sales in this case. So these are unmapped and are not being accounted for in our overall metrics. So from a user perspective, how can we kind of dive into this? So we have another dashboard here that kind of dives into what it might look like from a user perspective. So here we have a list of products that have no custom grouping assigned. So that's why they're coming up as blank on the previous view. We also, as Amanda alluded to earlier, have an embedded Power App right here where we have consumer goods SKU lookup and our view of unmapped by product. And that's kind of just broken up by sales. So we might want to prioritize this one as it's the highest amount of sales of the unmapped products. How might we address this? So we can take a look and in our embedded Power App, search for a SKU that is unmapped and look at the product details and see what's going on. So let's search by this SKU right here, and we'll see that this hairspray does not have a custom grouping in our Power App. So let's click here, View Item Details, and now we have all of the item details that have been mapped with a couple blank columns. So let's say, for example, as a user, I know that in the custom grouping, hairspray is unaffected. So we can do that and commit the changes if we want, or maybe we can add a comment. So say if there's a more difficult product, so say if we want to go into this 2-in-1, maybe we're a little less sure whether or not it will be affected, we might add a comment such as more analysis needed. We might do something like that, and that would be saved. So we'll do that in a separate step. But let's commit these changes now, and then let's edit the other. So we'll do the other SKU. This one we'll leave as blank, but we'll say more analysis needed, and we'll commit those changes. So now in the background, what's happening is Power Automate is picking this up as there's been a change to the underlying data source through the Power App. So that has triggered this Power Automate flow, which has, since the editing of a record, began refreshing the Power BI. So an important consideration is that since we are in the Power BI service app, we'll have to refresh here to get the newest version of the app. This is not refreshing the underlying data set. That is required. The Power Automate is required to do that. So let's refresh this app, and we'll see some changes have been made. So as we see, the hairspray has disappeared from this view because this is only a view of where custom grouping is blank. But we also see that the comment we added here for this product has more analysis needed, as we just had there. So we've been able to edit this record from a user perspective without even leaving the Power BI service. From a user perspective, this is really well integrated, and this is kind of a frictionless view where you've not had to leave anything to make any changes. Let's dive into under the hood, and let's see what makes each step integrate with each other and how exactly we've been able to do this. So in our Power app, let's go into that first. This is kind of the edit view of what a Power app looks like. And here we have, as we see, our search screen. And a new screen you can add right over here. We added a list, but there's a bunch of different types of screens you can add. Blank is for those who know what they want to do, that it's all customizable, but maybe you want something like a calendar or a list of people with images, for example, something more out of the box that you want to be editing. And our edit screen is one of those custom apps, but we have some edit forms that have gone down here into our custom grouping. So that's kind of the basis of what we did. A couple important considerations of when you're starting is you want to go into your data connectors, and there's a myriad of different connections you can make. We chose OneDrive for Business for this, but you could use SharePoint, you could use a SQL table, the common data service that exists with the Power platform. You can use a variety of different connectors to source this Power app. So that can be a step of integration there. One thing we want to go into now is the Power Automate flow. So once this change commit has happened, Power Automate flow, which looks like this is kind of the template we have here, and it triggers when the file is modified in OneDrive. As we said before, we have the OneDrive connected to our Power app, so anytime that's edited, our original file is being edited in OneDrive. So we have two things happen when this file is modified. So in many business cases, when there's a single source of truth that we're utilizing in a lot of different sources, we'd want to have a sense of versioning or an archive of files that tracks the edits that we've made. So we have that happening here, where when a file is modified in Power Automate, it copies a file, which is the file that we've just made, into a separate folder that will serve as our archive. This is important for a data integrity standpoint to maintain this source of changes and tracking that throughout time. So the other parallel flow that we have here is going into, once a file is modified, a data set is refreshed. So we saw that happen when we refreshed when we edited the Power app and then we refreshed the app. This automatically refreshed the underlying data set, which was the OneDrive file. So we also might add a step in here where we send an email, another integration right here to Outlook that we added. Another data consideration you might want to make is whether or not somebody needs to be alerted about these changes, whether or not there needs to be an approval process, as Amanda alluded to earlier. But there's really a lot of integration you can add in the Power Automate depending on what you want your triggers to be. Amanda had shown some earlier ones where we can actually trigger from Power BI. We, in this case, are using to Power BI. So with this in mind, we've successfully taken a file that lives in OneDrive, that has been edited in a Power app. It has gone through this flow and has, while all remaining in Power BI service, been able to go through this process, update with the changes that we made. So we're able to use each product to its fullest extent. As Amanda said, Power BI has a little bit of trouble sometimes editing in row or data entry components. So we've been able to integrate the Power app directly into Power BI, which has given us that functionality. And then Power Automate gives us this data refresh automation. So the user has never had to go into anything back end. They have not had to do any coding while all maintaining data integrity. They've gotten the answers they needed, and they've alerted people to the changes that have been made. There's a high degree of communication that's gone in as well. With just a few simple steps, we've been able to use these applications to their strength, created a user experience that was pretty seamless while conducting some more advanced automated tasks. So Amanda will now give us some final thoughts on this process and some key considerations that we might be making when building an automated solution.
So just in summary, what we looked at today was the individual components of the Power Platform. So we looked at Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, and also Power Virtual Agents, the newest one. I think there's a lot of value and merit in using them individually, but even more so when you think about how they integrate together, but also how they integrate across other technologies and platforms as well. So that will cover the summary for today. If you just go to the next slide, Charlie, I'll just share our contact information again in case you guys do have any questions about the content today, or if there's anything that you want to talk about a little bit further or thoughts for new events, feel free to send them on to us. But thank you so much for joining today, and I hope you guys all have a nice day or evening, depending on where you're joining from. Thanks.